I'm thinking about the relationship between morality and feelings, and how that relates to the evolution of feelings over time. Not the evolution of feelings over time, but what happens to feelings when they become kind of embedded and implicated in your life in a significant way. I mean, what I'd like to be able to do eventually is talk about this in terms of phylogeny, about the origin, about how species evolve over time, how those things relate to that. But I think right now I'll just think about it in terms of ontogeny, an individual, just life really, you know what I mean? I'll tell you where this is coming from. I made a video a while back talking about my vegetarianism. And I've been vegetarian for 30 years. I don't want to tell the whole story again, but I've been vegetarian about 30 years. It's a pretty thoroughgoing and clear vegetarianism. I've had loads of conversations with it, so I'm very good at doing the conversation around it. I know the arguments, I know the loopholes in the arguments, so I know when to duck out and when to just acknowledge sentimentality, those kind of things. So, I'm very, it's completely, without sounding arrogant, I hope, I've got a mature vegetarianism, really, that you develop over a long time and lots of conversation. But as I mentioned in that last video, the start of my vegetarianism, 30 odd years ago now, was basically that I wanted to cop off with this girl who was a vegetarian. She was a vegetarian, I was new in a new town. We got to talking, she said she was veggie, and I said, oh yeah, so am I. And I wasn't, I just lied, made it up on the spur of the moment. Basically so that at some point in the future she would sleep with me. And that all worked out quite well, actually, as a matter of fact, but a lot of things kind of folded out of that, really. Because here I am, 30 odd years later, still a vegetarian. I haven't seen that woman for 25 years at least. I don't know what she's doing with her life now. My vegetarianism, as I say, is it's not a major part of my life in the sense that I think about it. I don't think about it at all. But it's a major part of my life in that it features in large parts of my life. And I suppose the fact that I don't think about it is an indicator of how embedded it is, really. But at no point do I ever think about its origins in a kind of moment of weakness or a moment of giving in to base emotions, if you like. The feeling of wanting to be with this particular person and being willing to say pretty much anything to make that a reality. It just doesn't feature as part of that. So, to what extent does it make sense to say that the truth of my vegetarianism lies in its felt origins in lust or something, or a desire for intimacy? I don't think it makes any sense at all, quite honestly. I think the ground has shifted. I mean, that was the starting point for sure. But all the encrustations that's taken part around the sides of that, all these layers of rationalisation and justification and real knowledge, you know what I mean, about treatment of animals. I've been to slaughterhouses, and if you've ever been to one, you'll know that cows absolutely are frightened. They absolutely know what's going to happen, and they do feel pain. So so it's got all these incrustations of knowledge and ideas and opinion and also actions, participation in the kind of life of vegetarianism. It's slightly activist, to do with certain things to do with animal treatment, but also kind of consumer participation, the choices you make when you go to the supermarket about what to buy, just on every level, really. And all that stuff is encrusted around or on top of this basic emotional starting point. But I don't think it resolves back to that. I don't think it makes sense to say, yeah, well, basically it's the original feelings that's important, and that's the truth of your vegetarianism. It doesn't make any sense, I don't think, anymore. And there's probably lots of other examples of that kind of thing. I'm imagining a guy who, let's say, a surgeon, brilliant surgeon, saves hundreds of people's lives because of his fantastic surgical skills. And but the reason why he went into surgery in the first place is because he likes cutting human flesh. If he wasn't a surgeon, he'd be a serial killer. So, but that's how he starts off. He starts doing it and gets good at it, saves loads of lives. Does it make sense to say, well, basically he's immoral because basically he likes the feeling of a scalpel on skin? You know, does it make sense? I don't think it does, quite honestly. Any other examples? No, I can't think of any more. But yeah, I suppose this idea of trying to resolve the morality, or trying to evaluate the goodness, the quality of any action by looking at its origins, particularly when its origins are in feelings, because everything starts in feelings, and this is where I think we'd have to hark to phylogeny, origins of you know, the evolutionary origins of life forms. You know, certainly in the big picture, and on that scale, feelings undoubtedly came first. We felt stuff before we could think stuff. I mean, that's a pretty well established fact as far as I know. But that doesn't mean to say that the whole moral standing of our society now rests on these really shaky origins in our species history, when we were basically killing one another. And, you know, I know we're still doing it, but you know what I mean. It doesn't necessarily, that because the feeling came first, the feeling of fear, the feeling of anger, the feeling of lust, those feelings that drove us as a species and drove all life forms as a species, because they came first, and thinking and all those other things came later, and all the discourses, all those incrustations came later. It doesn't mean to say that that it resolves back to that. I don't think my vegetarianism resolves back to me wanting to sleep with this girl called Sue in Newcastle 30 odd years ago, and I don't think the validity of our culture and the moral standing of our culture is threatened, because a lot of it is built upon the lusts and violent desires of our ancestors.